Founder of the Atari brand, Nolan Bushnell, is known for a simple game design principle: easy to learn, hard to master. This so-called Bushnose Law seems so obvious that it's hard to see any reason for any game to not follow. The basic structure of a game is A. Goal. What are we trying to achieve in order to win? And B. Rules. Under what restrictions are we allowed to reach for the goal? These are the only two necessary elements to make a game, and everything on top of that is extra, of which inclusion should always be carefully justified. The more freedom players are given after these elements, the more uniquely personal experience they will have, figuring out the bounds of the game, the limits of its mechanics, and using their gained knowledge in their advantage. So the trick is to have the minimum possible amount of actions while doing the maximum number of things you could with those actions. Think of how much we can do by only one button. Press. Where? Might matter. Tap. How fast? Is it about the speed or the right rhythm? Hold. How long? Might affect the power or duration of the move. Press again once the conditions have changed. Is there a chance for a follow-up move? Or you can put in all kinds of unique Morse codes to form different combos of moves. All with one button. Think of how much Super Mario has managed to do with only a D-pad and two buttons, A and B, move, run and jump. With this setting you understand the goal and the rules of the game at first sight. Move right to reach the ending with your choice of movement of running and jumping. This seemingly simple set alone leads to walk, run, jump, double jump, triple jump, wall jump, stomp, crouch, carry, throw, slide, and it's all up to you to examine their applications. Mario is all about jumping, so as much as possible should be done with a jump. Mega Man replaced the run with a gun, but Super Mario needs no guns with such set of buns. The Legend of Zelda series has gone a long way with only a shield to block and a sword to swing. Link is of course known for his ever-growing arsenal of gadgets, but to ease the burden you are limited to have only a couple active at the same time. You are always using the same action buttons but also changing their function by switching the gadgets. Mario has also his power-ups, which work in a similar fashion. Instead of demanding more inputs, they serve to change the behavior of previously learned actions. So rather than adding extra mechanics on top of the original goal and rules of the game, any new action added should be bound into the already existing ones. If you already have a gun that shoots energy projectiles, rather than adding a dedicated action button just to open doors, have the doors to be energized by the blast of your gun. The original Doom had an action button for flipping switches, opening doors and scouring for secrets. Quake got rid of it, replacing the switches with pressure plates to be stepped on and buttons to be walked into. It didn't cut down the amount of interactivity, it only made it simpler and more intuitive. Later first-person shooters decided to add an action button by default, but making it a virtual hand to manipulate the environment with, it found a versatility of uses. Not limiting the doors and switches, but opening the whole game world possible for all kinds of interactions. All the in-game objects became pieces of world-building material or tools of destruction. This was so well justified addition that it became an established feature of the type, and it's now harder to find a first-person game without it. So if there is a mechanic in a game that only does one thing, maybe that thing should be reconsidered. Maybe the opposite of the simplicity discussed so far would be the games that lock themselves behind a theory course of its mechanics. In massive open-world role-playing games there tend to be too much to be learned too fast. Crafting, building, modifying, leveling, menus and numbers after menus and numbers, which leads into the first hours being mostly reading and rereading, studying the systems, before we are even shown the reason to study, the gameplay in its essence. Does it really sound too bad to let the game introduce itself first with the gameplay in its most simple form of core mechanics? After the game has awakened our interest or at least curiosity, we are more receptive to learn more. In the worst possible cases, after crossing this unnecessarily high threshold to get in the game, it turns out to be unsatisfactory. Way more simple than it pretends to be. Tedious to learn, dull to master. The strongest defense for the anomaly called Death Stranding is its straightforward gameplay. Simply peculiar and very, very fascinating. It's effortless to understand just by looking at it, but it demands continuous concentration on both the character and the surroundings to fully manage. Beautifully crafted template for countless unique experiences. Such a pity it takes so much of the bad to get to the good that it ends up being not worth it. One of the many allures of Dark Souls is its mechanical simplicity, with surprising amount of depth and variety hidden underneath the simple surface. At first glance it follows the classic system of offense and defense as in The Legend of Zelda, but this time their use is limited by stamina. You can run, but it depletes stamina. You need to walk or stop to restore, limiting the distance you can flee from your enemies. You can attack, but it eats stamina. Heavier attacks eat more, teaching you to strike only when you are sure of it and forcing you to not strike in between. You can avoid taking damage by blocking, but taking a strike to the shield eats stamina instead. Restore while holding a shield to guard, but even faster without blocking, leaving you vulnerable. You can parry the hit, draining stamina, backstab or riposte to drain even more. You can avoid a hit by rolling, but it eats stamina. The total weight of your equipment affects the stamina cost and the speed of these moves, as well as the rate of regeneration. Not to mention all the items and leveling attributes to optimize the use of your stamina. It is simply amazing how much more depth, strategy, decision-making and therefore challenge is added to the game only by this one seemingly simple mechanic of limitation. Compare this to Nioh, which uses the same core mechanics but also adds its own quirks. No matter how much new it brings to the table, in the bigger picture of this whole combat system and its strengths, Nioh requires too much more to add too little, leaving the screen stuffed with extra junk while its original example kept the system visibly as simple as possible. We can take this comparison even further and affirm the strength of the original design philosophy with Sekiro. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice gives us even more satisfying combat system, not by expanding it to more, but condensing it to less. One weapon to attack and block, one posture bar to deplete and restore. More simple, more restricted, and consequently more demanding. Just strike or deflect, dash or jump, and it never gets any more complex from this. Like the stamina in Dark Souls, the posture bar is more dynamic than it first seems. It always recovers when you are not taking hits, but the more there is damage, the slower it recovers. You can shake off tiny amounts faster, but the quickest method for any amount is to take your stand and keep your guard. Unlike in Dark Souls with the stamina, the amount of your health has also a direct impact on your posture. Fast recovery on full health and very slow when close to dying. And ultimately, understanding what makes you weak teaches you also how to hurt, for every enemy is dictated by these same rules. As with The Legend of Zelda, Sekiro also offers a variety of extra tools. But you are able to use only one at a time with only one button, and even better, They are completely optional. The only requirement to beat the game is your skill with the sword. Exemplary game design, to do so much with so little. Easy to learn, hard to master.